Like I mentioned, our next speaker is Terpsi Karpasiti. Terpsi specialises in cardio, respiratory, critical care and ECMO. Terpsi's main clinical and research interests involve the nutritional, metabolic and gastrointestinal complication management of complex critically ill patients who require ECMO and other forms of advanced mechanical cardiorespiratory support. Terpsi has an extended role within the critical care team to include nasogastric and bedside post-caloric tube placements, and also co-chairs the CCSG NJ team. She's also Joint Research Officer for the BDA CCSG and has obviously put together some fantastic speakers for today, including herself. So I'll hand over to you, Terpsi.
Thank you. Thanks for introducing me, Rebecca. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fab. Okay, so my presentation will actually be very brief because we've got an extremely amazing lineup of speakers today, so I will not bore you with my stuff, but I will give you a quick overview of our recently published novel tech assessment document, which is focusing on guided tube placements. So the purpose of the document that we've published is to provide a brief overview and assessment of novel tech devices available for guided tube placements. And in fact, we focused on the two main guided tube placements that were available in the UK at the time. So that's CoreTrack by Avanos and Iris by Cardinal Health. And at the bottom, you can see a brief description of each system. And there will be many more details on each system later in the day. But as many of you know, CoreTrack utilizes electromagnetic tracing, and Iris uses video guidance to determine the feeding tube's path. As part of the document, we provide a review of each device purpose, efficacy, publications to date, and that's specifically data on both gastric and post-pyloric feeding tube placement success, as well as respiratory misplacements. And evidence is graded based on 3 criteria. So based on clinical studies, whether it's scientifically sound and author independence. And manufacturer guidance and competency assessments currently available for each system were also reviewed, and they were graded against 3 further criteria. So whether they're accurate, whether they're comprehensive for the level, and whether they're evidence-based. And based on what we found, recommendations are made for the training of new operators and in particular dietitians for each device. And then finally, we also assessed each system's logistics. So in terms of it being bedside, simple to use, quick, and their cost effectiveness, as well as the ability to confirm anatomical points within the respiratory and gastrointestinal tracts. So why did we decide to do this? First of all, and most importantly, to promote safe and effective placements of enteral feeding tubes on the bedside, and to support new operators to confidently complete competency training, but also provide opportunities for advancing dietetic practice, which is becoming more and more popular now, and to improve the quality, to work with manufacturers to improve the quality of currently available devices, and in the longer term to standardize practice nationally. So these are some of our results. Each assessment is based on a detailed literature review, which was focusing on the incidence of tube misplacement and in particular those resulting in pneumothorax. And as you can see on the first table, data were analyzed from over 21,000 CoreTrack placements, and undetected misplacement and pneumothorax risk were both statistically significantly higher in low use versus high use CoreTrack centers, which suggests that expertise actually plays a key role in avoiding such complications. Misplacement rates range from 0.005% to 0.21% risk per tube, and that depends on center expertise. And then at the bottom table, you can see our Iris review. So only 200 Iris placements have been published to date, so a lot less. It's a newer system, so a lot less than CoreTrack. Detected misplacement rates were higher than in CoreTrack. And in our opinion, this could be because the large Iris tube tip may mean that the tube deflects into the trachea more easily. But it could also be that Iris, because it uses direct vision, it can actually detect tracheal misplacement earlier, and therefore leading to earlier detection of respiratory misplacement and removal of the feeding tube. So details of these studies can be found on the supplementary material section of our document, but in some of the following sessions, our speakers will also touch on these study findings in more detail. But I have to say here that by any means, I cannot take credit for the information on this particular slide because my colleague and friend, Dr. Stephen Taylor, has done a fabulous job collecting these data. So thank you for doing that. In terms of gastrointestinal placement success and placement duration appear to be associated with higher use and training for both devices. So success is expertise dependent. As you can see, gastric placement success for CORTRAC was 98%, and post-pyloric placement success ranged from 87 to 91% within 1 hour of request, and that was in expert centers. However, that dropped to a range of 43 to 69% in non-expert centers. So basically, CORTRAC success rates can actually be similar to endoscopy, but CORTRAC requires a lot less attempts, is less invasive, and has less overall costs. But also, CORTRAC has been around for a while. More techniques have been described and studied to aid successful placement. In terms of IRIS, as you can see, success rates published in studies are a little bit lower, but still quite high. So for gastric placement, 82 to 97%, and then there's a wider range for post-pyloric placement, so from 58 to about 88%, with higher success rates for duodenal placement rather than deep small intestinal and jejunal placement. However, the final T position was only consistently recorded in one study, and from the initial evidence that we have, there is some evidence that concurrent prokinetic use may actually increase success. But the lower success rates using IRIS may be because of the device, as I said, being still relatively new, and less techniques to promote success have actually been studied and published. It may also be due to resistance resulting from the large tube tip, as I said before, or because of uncertainty of actually confirming exact post-pyloric tube position. And as you can see from our assessments on the right-hand side, we identified that using additional specific evidence-based and validated methods, CORTRAC actually can have the ability to potentially differentiate between different gastrointestinal anatomical markers. And on the other hand, IRIS's ability to do this becomes less as we approach a deep small intestinal position following duodenum part 2 and beyond. So next, we completed a review of currently available training guidance for both systems. And of course, just like all devices, there are pros and cons, so we identified specific areas for improvement. And one point that was evident for both systems is the lack of the use of published evidence and standardization of evidence-based validated methods to determine tube position. And my colleagues will go into a lot more detail about this and some of the evidence-based validated methods that are available for each system in their upcoming presentations. But for CORTRAC, the risk of artifacts related to receiver misplacement, deviation from the midline, how much is acceptable. So most gastrointestinal placements may have some deviation from the midline in the upper quadrants, so a little bit more guidance on how to determine what is safe and what is not. And then that, in our opinion, would lead in less tubes being removed unnecessarily, clearer differentiation between gastric and lung placement. A wider variety of traces for training purposes would mean that training would be more comprehensive, as new operators would have the ability to also access examples of unusual traces, and detailed supervision and assessment plans, and in particular, what are the training arrangements for centers where there is no pre-existing expertise or someone who's already trained to do this. And for IRIS is very, very similar. So placement to each gastrointestinal anatomical point was based on tube length, and tube length may not always be accurate in determining actual anatomical position. For example, I cannot say that at 70 centimeters I will reach a post-pyloric position in every single patient. This may vary widely in extremes of height, or I may be coiling in the stomach. And the same considerations as for CORTRAC, about a wider variety of images to enhance the training experience, including key characteristics of different anatomical points, maybe some illustrations, video recordings, and a plan for detailed supervision, assessment, and competency plans. And in our opinion, all this would improve training quality, competence, and confidence of new operators. And then we can also collect some qualitative data to assess these parameters. So based on this review, we have the CCSG NJ Team training recommendations for guided tube placements. For core track, although electromagnetic placements are simple because they do not show actual anatomy and they vary widely, we felt that operators needed a relatively longer training period. And based on published data in centers achieving the lowest complication rates, new operators received a total of 50 to 75 supervisions. So as a result, you can see they're similar, but core track is a little bit longer. So 10 supervised placements 1-to-1 to become a solo trainee operator, and then for core track 40 more, and for iris 20 more to become an expert. And again, the reason is that iris images, although they're more complex than electromagnetic traces, they have features which are consistently related to actual anatomy. So once operators can recognize this and these particular features, less placements are likely to be required in order to achieve expertise. And then following this, 10 more placements supervised to become a trainer and train others, and then a minimum of 10 placements per year to maintain competency. Okay, so this brings me to the end of my presentation. If you would like access to these documents and in more detail, please do join us to get access to the full documents. I've got the links there. I've got the link for the CCSG NJ team, but also the BAPEN nasogastric special interest group, which we really thank for their contribution as well. The assessments will be reviewed annually or earlier, depending on whether there's any significant updates on evidence base or manufacturer guidance. And I have to say here as well that these novel tech assessments were extensively peer reviewed by multiple members of both the BDA, CCSG and BAPEN NG-SIG teams. So I thank them for their useful contributions, but I'd also like to we've sent these documents to manufacturers as well. So I would like to thank any manufacturers that have come back with comments to make these documents what they are today. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the Q&A at the end of this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terpsi. That was really, really interesting. And we look forward, I think, to asking lots of questions at the Q&A session at the end of the